"Hey, could someone grab the waitress? I need another drink." Those 10 words destroyed my brother's life. Not immediately. That came later, when 300 wedding guests watched his secrets explode across a projection screen in high definition, when his perfect marriage crumbled in real time, when the FBI seized his assets and dragged him away in handcuffs. But it started with those 10 words, spoken loud enough for half of Tara's wedding reception to hear, while I stood there in my maid of honor dress, holding champagne for our mother, the waitress. Michael Morrison, golden boy, successful businessman, family favorite, had just called his own sister the help, a mere servant, at our cousin's wedding, where I was literally the maid of honor. The laughter that followed felt like acid in my veins. Relatives who'd known me for 33 years suddenly found it hilarious that I looked like hired staff. Mom giggled nervously. Dad coughed with discomfort, and my cousin Tara watched with mortified silence. But Michael? Michael was glowing, feeding off their amusement like a vampire drinking blood. That's when something inside me didn't just snap, it crystallized. Every year of his cruelty, every dismissive comment, every moment he'd made me feel invisible suddenly had perfect clarity. I smiled sweetly and leaned close to his ear, my voice barely a whisper. "Great joke, Michael, but remember, there's always a second course." He laughed like I was playing along, like I was still the same doormat sister who'd taken his abuse for 3 decades. He had no idea I was already planning his complete destruction, and it was going to be beautiful. Let me paint you a picture of Michael Morrison, golden boy extraordinaire. At 35, he owned a chain of luxury car dealerships, handed to him by Dad at 28 because Michael has the vision. His wife Lena was picture perfect, his house was magazine-worthy, and his Rolex collection could fund a small country. Meanwhile, I was Emily, the administrative assistant at the clinic, the still-figuring-things-out daughter. I was the one they introduced with apologetic smiles and nervous laughter. "Oh, Emily? She's finding herself," as if I were a useless lost tourist instead of a grown woman with a mortgage and responsibilities. I felt enraged every Christmas, every birthday, and every family gathering, listening as Michael's accomplishments were listed like royal announcements, while my existence was mentioned in whispers. And I'd smile and nod, and pretend the comparisons didn't carve pieces out of my soul, one dismissive comment at a time. For years, I'd accepted this narrative. I was the unremarkable sister, the backup plan, the one who'd probably end up caring for aging parents, while Michael lived his champagne life in his glass tower, looking down at the rest of us mortals. But here's what they didn't know. I'd been watching, listening, collecting, and for the past 6 months, I'd been helping Aunt Linda with the family's financial records. It was supposedly to help me learn about budgeting, but actually, I'd been working with her because something felt off about Michael's sudden wealth. Linda had always been meticulous with family finances, and she'd started noticing discrepancies. Money that should have been in family accounts wasn't, transactions that didn't add up. Michael's lifestyle growing more lavish while the family business seemed to be struggling. We'd spent countless evenings going through old bank statements and business records, with Linda teaching me to trace financial patterns. "Look at this," she'd whisper, pointing to transfers that happened in the middle of the night. Money doesn't move like this by accident. But I hadn't been ready to act. Part of me still hoped we were wrong, that there was some explanation for the missing funds. Until Tara's rehearsal dinner changed everything. Michael's wife Lena had been my friend once, before she married him 3 years ago and gradually pulled away from me. I'd always suspected it was Michael's influence, his way of isolating me from anyone who might actually care. That night at the rehearsal dinner, Michael left his phone charging by the dessert table. No passcode. Same old arrogance, same assumption that rules didn't apply to golden boys. When it buzzed, I glanced over casually, expecting some boring work email. "Can't wait till Sunday's over. Counting down. Jay." My stomach dropped like I'd been punched. Below the text was a photo that made my blood turn to ice water in my veins. Michael, shirtless. Definitely not with his wife. Definitely not alone. I nearly dropped my champagne flute, my hands suddenly shaking like an earthquake had hit my nervous system. The perfect husband, the family golden boy, was a cheating fraud. And suddenly, I had ammunition. Nuclear world-ending ammunition. More importantly, I finally had the motivation to use everything Linda and I had discovered. Tara's wedding morning dawned crisp and bright, perfect weather for perfect revenge. I'd spent the night planning, not sleeping. My mind was a war room, strategies floating like battle plans across my brain. This wasn't about explosive drama or a Jerry Springer show. This was about precision, about timing, about making sure the truth came out exactly when it would hurt most, when escape was impossible, when witnesses were abundant. My hands were steady as I did my makeup, but my reflection looked different, sharper somehow, like the soft edges of people-pleasing Emily had been filed away overnight. The woman staring back had the cold focus of a sniper. The venue buzzed with pre-ceremony energy, flowers everywhere, white roses that probably cost more than my monthly rent, photographers capturing candid moments that were actually planned, rehearsed and staged, relatives air-kissing and pretending to care about each other in that pretend dance that families do when they're being watched. Michael strutted around in his perfectly tailored suit, playing the role of devoted family man while his phone burned with evidence of his betrayal. He looked so confident, so sure of his charm, so certain that this family celebration would go according to script. He even winked at me once, as if we were co-conspirators instead of enemies. "You have no idea what's coming, you piece of dirt," I thought. During the ceremony, I stood beside Tara, my cousin who'd been like a sister to me growing up, who didn't deserve to have her perfect day marred by family drama. Unfortunately, there was no other way. I held her bouquet and smiled at all the right moments, my face a mask of maid of honor perfection while Michael's secret sat like a time bomb in my clutch, ticking down to detonation. But I waited. The perfect moment requires perfect timing. Too early and people could leave, could avoid the fallout. Too late and the impact diminishes. No, this had to be precise, surgical, devastating. The reception began with dinner, toasts, and dancing. Michael gave a speech about family and loyalty that made me physically nauseous, bile rising in my throat as he spoke about sacred bonds and being there for each other, while betraying his wife and stealing from his family. Then came my moment. "I'd like to say a few words too," I announced, standing up with my champagne glass, my voice cutting through the chatter like a blade. The room quieted, all eyes on me. Michael looked mildly annoyed. This wasn't part of the program. This wasn't his show anymore. "Family is everything," I began, my voice steady and clear, each word carefully chosen. "It's about trust, loyalty, and being there for each other through thick and thin." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "But sometimes," I continued, letting the pause stretch like a noose, "family members aren't who they pretend to be." The atmosphere shifted, tension crackling like electricity before a storm. Michael's smile faltered. "Sometimes the people we trust most are living double lives." I pulled out the phone I'd taken and connected it to the reception's sound system, a trick I'd arranged with the DJ earlier, slipping him a $100 bill and a sob story about a surprise slideshow. "Michael, you left this at the rehearsal dinner." His face went white as I held up his phone, blood draining like someone had opened a valve. "I thought you might want everyone to see the real you." The message appeared on the venue's projection screen, the same screen that had been showing Tara and Mike's engagement photos moments before, now displaying Michael's betrayal in high definition for 300 guests. "Can't wait till Sunday's over." Counting down. J. And there it was. The photo. Unmistakable. Undeniable. Michael in someone else's bed, another woman's hands visible at the edge of the frame, her red nail polish catching the light like drops of blood. The silence lasted exactly 3 heartbeats. 1 and 2 and 3 and before the explosion. Gasps that sounded like air being sucked out of the room. Shouts of disbelief. Chairs scraping against marble floors as people jumped up, necks craning for a better view. Someone's wine glass shattered. A child started crying somewhere in the back. "What the hell is this?" Lena's voice cut through the chaos, her face twisted in shock and betrayal as she stared at the screen showing her husband's infidelity. Michael's wife stood frozen at their table, her elegant dress suddenly looking like a costume for a play she no longer wanted to be in. Her hands flew to her mouth, covering what looked like a silent scream, mascara already starting to smudge as tears formed. Michael lunged toward me, his face twisted with rage and panic, but I stepped back calmly, smoothly, like I'd choreographed this moment in my mind 1,000 times. "The truth," I said into the microphone, my voice cutting through the chaos. Finally. You scum, he snarled, all pretense of charm evaporating like steam. You jealous, pathetic. The words hung in the air like poison. I watched his face contort, watched 35 years of barely controlled anger pour out of him in front of everyone who'd ever believed in his golden boy facade. Careful, I interrupted, my voice ice-cold and measured. Everyone's watching. And they were. 300 wedding guests staring at the golden boy as his mask slipped completely, revealing the monster underneath. His face was blood red, veins bulging in his forehead like tree roots, spittle flying as he screamed at me with the fury of a rabid animal. His expensive suit was rumpled now, his perfectly styled hair falling across his face. This was the real Michael Morrison, the one who'd called me names behind closed doors, who'd stolen my dignity piece by piece, who'd made me feel small and worthless for 33 soul-destroying years. The one I'd lived with my entire life. Tara was trying to salvage her wedding reception, her face a mixture of horror and embarrassment that her special day had become a family scandal. Her new husband Mike put a protective arm around her as guests began to murmur and point. "How long?" Lena demanded, her voice raw and broken as she finally found her words. "How long have you been cheating on me, you bastard?" But Michael wasn't looking at his humiliated wife, wasn't even acknowledging the woman whose life he'd just destroyed in front of half the town. He was staring at me with pure, unadulterated hatred, the kind that comes from being exposed, from having your carefully constructed lies stripped away like old paint. "You have no idea what you've just done," he hissed, leaning close enough that I could smell his cologne mixed with sweat and fear. I smiled then, really smiled for the first time in months. "Oh, Michael, I'm just getting started." The wedding dissolved into chaos like a controlled demolition. Guests fled like the building was on fire, clutching their purses and dragging confused children toward the exits. The photographer had stopped taking pictures, standing frozen with his camera dangling useless around his neck. The band packed up their instruments in awkward silence while caterers whispered in corners, probably calculating whether they'd still get paid. Tara locked herself in the bridal suite while her mother tried to salvage what remained of the reception, barking orders at vendors like a general commanding a retreat. Dad dragged Michael outside before he could make an even bigger scene, his face purple with shame and fury. I found myself surprisingly calm in the eye of the storm, like I was floating above the wreckage instead of standing in it. Years of suppressed rage had finally found their outlet, and it felt like breathing for the first time in decades. My chest expanded, my shoulders relaxed, my jaw unclenched. This was what freedom felt like, but this was just the opening act. The real show was about to begin. 3 days later, I was sitting in a coffee shop downtown, the same one where Michael and I used to argue about everything and nothing, where he'd once told me I'd never amount to anything, when my phone rang. "We need to talk." His voice was tight with barely controlled fury, like he was speaking through clenched teeth. "I'm listening." I stirred my latte slowly, deliberately, letting the silence stretch between us like a taut wire. "You want a war? Fine. But you have no idea what you're up against. I'll destroy you. I'll ruin your life, your reputation, everything you've ever worked for." The old Emily would have cowered, would have apologized, would have begged for forgiveness. But that Emily was dead, buried under 33 years of humiliation and neglect. "Michael, do you remember Aunt Linda?" I asked conversationally, like we were discussing the weather. Silence. Long, pregnant silence that told me everything I needed to know. "She's been the family accountant for 20 years. Very thorough record keeper. Gets excited about spreadsheets and paper trails. Loves a good mystery, especially when it involves numbers that don't add up." More silence, but I could hear his breathing change, becoming shallow and rapid. "She's also been keeping track of some interesting financial discrepancies. Money that should have gone to the family trust but somehow ended up in your personal accounts. Funny how that works." I heard him swallow hard, the sound audible through the phone. "You've been embezzling from our family for years, haven't you? Skimming from Dad's business, the trust fund, even Grandma's estate. Taking what wasn't yours while lecturing the rest of us about responsibility and hard work. You can't prove—" "Actually, I can." I pulled out a thick manila envelope from my purse, running my fingers along its edges. Bank statements, forged signatures, dummy accounts, shell companies. Linda and I have been documenting everything for months. Every stolen dollar, every forged document, every lie you've told. The coffee shop suddenly felt very quiet, like the universe was holding its breath. "What do you want?" he whispered, and for the first time in my life I heard fear in Michael Morrison's voice. "Justice," I said simply, the word tasting sweet on my tongue. "And an apology, a real one, in front of the entire family. No more games, no more lies, no more treating me like I'm nothing. Never." "Then I'll see you in court." I hung up and smiled, my reflection in the coffee shop window showing a woman I barely recognized, someone strong, someone dangerous, someone who'd finally learned to bite back. The real game was just beginning. Word of Michael's affair spread through our family like wildfire, but the embezzlement allegations hit like a nuclear bomb, leaving nothing but radioactive silence in their wake. Suddenly, every family gathering became a tense investigation, relatives eyeing each other with suspicion and recalculating decades of financial interactions. The comfortable narrative we'd all lived with, Michael the successful golden boy, Emily the disappointment, cracked open like a rotten egg. Relatives whispered in corners, comparing notes about missing money and suspicious transactions they'd dismissed or forgotten. Uncle Tom remembered the time Michael borrowed $5,000 for a business opportunity that never materialized. Cousin Sarah recalled loan documents she'd signed that Michael claimed were just formalities. The golden boy narrative crumbled as people remembered all the times Michael had borrowed money and never paid it back. All the business opportunities that somehow only enriched him. All the promises of investment returns that never came. How the heck had we all been so blind? Dad called an emergency family meeting at his house, the same dining room where I'd been dismissed and diminished 1,000 times before, where Michael's achievements were celebrated while my existence was tolerated. But this time was different. This time I walked in with Linda, my lawyer Janet, and 3 boxes of evidence that weighed more than years of family denial. The dining room felt smaller somehow, cramped with tension and the weight of revealed truths. Mom sat rigid in her chair, her face a mask of barely controlled devastation. Dad looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his failures as a father and a guardian of family assets. "Before anyone says anything," I announced, my voice cutting through the nervous chatter, "you need to see this." I started laying out documents like playing cards in a game of truth. Bank statements showing money transferred from family accounts to Michael's personal holdings. Forged signatures on loan documents that looked like Dad's handwriting but weren't quite right. Even receipts for luxury purchases made with embezzled funds. Each paper I placed on the table felt like a small explosion, destroying another piece of the family mythology we'd all believed in. "That Rolex collection you're so proud of?" I looked directly at Michael, who sat slumped in his chair like a deflated balloon. "Bought with Grandma's inheritance money that was supposed to be split between all the grandchildren." Mom gasped, her hand flying to her throat. "The down payment on that beautiful house Lena loves so much? Skimmed from Dad's business accounts over 2 years, taken in small amounts so no one would notice." Dad's face turned ashen, the color draining like someone had opened a valve. "And this?" I held up a particularly damning document, my hand steady as a surgeon's. "Shows he's been planning to drain the family trust completely and disappear, probably with his girlfriend Jessica, the one from the photos." Michael sat in stunned silence, his usually perfect posture crumbling as his lawyer, a nervous young man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, whispered frantically in his ear. "How long have you known?" Dad asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Linda suspected for years, but we started seriously investigating 6 months ago. The affair?" I glanced at Michael's pale face. "That I discovered at the wedding, but it was exactly the catalyst I needed to finally act on what we'd already uncovered." "You're just vindictive!" Michael snarled suddenly, his composure finally cracking completely. "You're destroying our family out of spite. You can't stand that I'm successful, that I matter, that people actually respect me." The room went silent except for the ticking of Mom's antique clock and the sound of my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. "No." I stood up, voice steady as steel, looking down at this man who'd terrorized me for 33 soul-destroying years. "You destroyed our family. I'm just showing everyone the wreckage you left behind." The legal battle that followed was everything I'd hoped for and more. A public crucifixion of the golden boy who'd ruled our family like a tyrant for decades. Michael's high-powered attorney, a slick bastard in a $1,000 suit who probably charged more per hour than I made in a month, tried every trick in the book. He claimed I was a disgruntled sibling with mental health issues, painting me as the crazy sister who'd finally snapped. He suggested the evidence was fabricated, that Linda and I had conspired to frame an innocent man. He even attempted to paint me as the real embezzler, spinning a narrative where I'd somehow stolen from myself. But Janet was better. God, she was so much better. She'd built an airtight case that traced every stolen dollar like a bloodhound following a scent, every forged signature analyzed by handwriting experts, every lie Michael had told over the past decade documented and cross-referenced. The evidence was overwhelming, devastating, undeniable. The courtroom was packed with family members, friends, and local reporters who'd caught wind of the scandal. The Morrison family drama had become entertainment, our pain turned into public spectacle. I could feel eyes on me constantly, whispers following me into the bathroom, cameras flashing as I walked up the courthouse steps each morning. Michael sat at the defendant's table looking smaller than I'd ever seen him, his usual swagger replaced by the hunched posture of a trapped animal. His expensive suits couldn't hide the fact that he was dying inside, piece by piece, as his carefully constructed life was dissected in public. This is what you get, you monster. This is what 33 years of abuse earns you. When I took the stand, I spoke clearly and calmly about years of emotional abuse, financial manipulation, and systematic theft from our family. My voice never wavered, even when describing the most painful moments. The birthday parties where I was forgotten, the achievements that were dismissed, the constant message that I was less than, or in fact worth less than nothing, compared to Golden Boy Michael. This isn't about money, I said, looking directly at the jury, making eye contact with each face. It's about accountability, about consequences, about showing that no one, no matter how charming or successful they appear, is above the law. Michael's lawyer tried to rattle me during cross-examination, his voice dripping with condescension as he attempted to paint me as bitter and vindictive. Isn't it true that you orchestrated this entire scheme because you were jealous of your brother's success? That you couldn't stand seeing him happy while your own life was falling apart? I looked at him for a long moment, letting the silence stretch until the courtroom was completely still. No, I replied evenly, my voice carrying to every corner of the room. I exposed his crimes because stealing from your family isn't success, it's sociopathy, and I'm done enabling sociopaths. The courtroom erupted in murmurs, and I saw several jury members nodding in agreement. Michael's face had gone completely white, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. He knew he was doomed, knew that his charm and manipulation had finally met their match. When the verdict came back, guilty on all counts of embezzlement, fraud, and identity theft, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I'd been carrying for 33 years. The sound of the judge's gavel felt like thunder, like the sky finally opening after decades of drought. Michael was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but I wasn't finished. 5 years? That was a nap. I wanted him haunted. While the family patted me on the back, while my dad tried clumsily to reconnect over lukewarm coffee and shame, I stayed focused. Michael's empire hadn't just been built on theft. It had been propped up by enablers, silent partners, and accomplices too cowardly to stop him. And I wasn't letting them crawl away unscathed. I started with his old CFO, Mark, the guy who didn't know about the embezzlement but somehow drove a Tesla paid for by the dealership's offshore accounts. One anonymous tip to the IRS later, and Mark's assets were frozen. Then I found the lawyer who helped Michael funnel money into shell companies. Turned out he had a bit of a habit for expense report fraud and an even bigger one for sleeping with interns. I gave both to the Bar Association. He's not a lawyer anymore. I burned every bridge he ever walked across and salted the ashes. That was phase 2. Phase 3? Lena. No, I didn't hurt her. I promoted her. She had skills Michael never appreciated. Organization, charisma, marketing genius. I partnered with her to buy up what remained of Michael's business portfolio at auction. We got it for pennies, rebranded everything, put his name in the fine print as a cautionary tale. Every customer got a brochure with a friendly reminder. Under new management, no fraud this time, we promise. It went viral. Michael called me from prison a month later. Collect call. Naturally, I declined. He tried again. I answered just once, just for fun. You can't win, he spat. You think this is over? You think I'll rot while you wear my name like a trophy? Michael, I purred. This isn't a trophy. It's a warning label. I hung up before he could reply, and then I smiled, because he wasn't just in prison anymore. He was in my shadow, forever. 6 months later, a blog post went viral. The sister who took down a fraudulent millionaire and then bought his company. The journalist asked for an interview. I didn't give one. I gave them a portfolio, evidence, receipts, timeline. The article dropped. Comments exploded. Justice like this needs to be bottled. Emily Morrison, CEO of Petty and Powerful. Why isn't this a Netflix series yet? Michael's name was SEO poison now. No one would hire him when he got out. No one would trust him. Even his prison wedding got canceled when the bride found the article. Oops. Meanwhile, I hosted a new family dinner. Not Thanksgiving. That felt too wholesome. It was a survivor's feast, invite only. No apologies allowed. Only people who'd stood by me or had the guts to admit they failed and make amends through actions, not tears. My father was there, quiet, helpful, still broken. That was enough. Lena toasted me. To the sister who didn't just get revenge, she built an empire on it. Everyone laughed. I didn't. Not revenge, I said, swirling my wine. Reclamation. That night, I slept like a queen in a house built on ruins, and I didn't lose a second of rest over it. Michael was released on parole after serving 3 years and 8 months. He sent me a handwritten letter. The outside read, "To the only person who ever beat me." I didn't open it. Instead, I drove to his old mansion, now my company's headquarters. I tossed the letter into the stone fireplace in what used to be his office, now my executive boardroom. I didn't need to read it. Whatever he had to say was irrelevant. Because I won, and he knew it. I didn't just destroy his legacy. I replaced it with mine, and every time someone Googled his name, they'd find mine instead. Emily Morrison, the girl he mocked, the waitress, the executioner. If you enjoyed watching this story, please like it and subscribe for more tales now. Do you think Michael got exactly what he deserved? Or do you think Emily was just jealous of his success and set out to ruin him? Was Emily selfish for disrupting her cousin's wedding? Have you ever seen something similar happen? Please share it with us in the comments below and include your favorite type of story: family drama, inheritance tales, wedding disasters, or office drama. Then watch the next video that just popped on screen for some more mind-blowing drama. Thanks for watching.